Proof that Tiana is the most stylish Disney princess. Another day, another Disney-related video. I've just been in a magical sort of mood lately. Released in 2009, Disney's The Princess and the Frog not only introduced Disney's first and only Black princess, but it was also one of Disney's last films that was traditionally hand-drawn. The film is a very loose adaptation of the 2002 book, The Frog Princess, which in turn is inspired by The Frog Prince by the Brothers Grimm. The Princess and the Frog follows Tiana as she attempts to find a way to turn back into a human after kissing a frog and turning into one herself. While Tiana is a frog for the majority of the film, when she's human, she winds up not only having the most outfits of any Disney princess, but some of the best ones when it comes down to historical accuracy and character development. In today's video, I'll be breaking down all of Tiana's outfits, specifically how they relate to the time period and the character. So, let's get into it. Children's clothes. Let's start where the movie does, in 1912 with Tiana as a child. She's first shown on screen in a pistachio green dress with matching accessories. It's our first introduction to the character, and I must say, she's utterly adorable. The dimples, the pigtails, my heart.
There is no way in this whole wide world I would never kiss a frog. Yuck!
Her dress is simple in design, a nice stark contrast to Lottie's poofy pink princess dress, which is a subtle way to showcase the two girls' differences in both personality and economic status. Tiana's outfit resembles the popular children's dress style of the time period, which makes sense as her mother is a seamstress and had the ability to keep her child in fashion. The color, besides being an ode to her future frogness, was also considered stylish in the 1910s, along with other romantic pastels like purple, pink, and peach. Her shoes are a pair of era-appropriate black Mary Janes, and she wears them with a pair of white below-the-knee socks. During this time period, children also wore stockings, but I think the socks were a smart choice considering Alice, from Alice in Wonderland, wears black Mary Janes with white stockings. Her dress ends at the knee and features a drop waist, the fashionable style for women and children at the time. The dress also has a bow at the back, which is connected to the lighter green dress sash, a popular detail on children's dresses. The dress also has a Peter Pan collar and short sleeves. While short sleeves were worn, longer, slightly puffed sleeves were definitely more popular. Also, not that it was at all necessary, but considering floral trim was popular on children's dresses at the time, I think it could have been a nice ode to the character's future if they'd had lilies or magnolias on the hem of the dress, especially since at this point in time, the character still has a hint of playfulness, at least when compared to her personality as she grows up. She's also briefly shown wearing a nondescript tan coat, which likely was her only one, so its simplicity is not only fashionable, but economical. Tiana is shown wearing a pale yellow nightdress with a ruffled trim. Simple and accurate. Pajama sets were beginning to be worn during this time as well, but weren't necessarily mainstream. Workwear. Flash forward 14 years and Tiana is now a working woman, the first and only Disney princess with a job. The Princess and the Frog film gave us the rare opportunity to see a Disney princess in workwear. In the film, Tiana is shown in two different dresses/uniforms, a teal blue dress for one waitressing gig, and a yellow dress for another.
Good night, cows. Good morning, Jinx.
The teal dress has a Peter Pan collar and a flowing tie detail at the neckline. The apron has a ruffle trim and the name of the restaurant, Cal's, embroidered on the pocket. Aprons could either be pinned on or tied. Women in the service industry in the 1920s were required to wear whatever uniform was provided by their employer or what was available in stores or catalogs. While these uniforms began in black or white at the beginning of the decade, by the mid-1920s, fashion began to influence these uniforms and soon pink, blue, and even violet dresses were sold. Tiana's shoes are a pair of brown slip-on pumps, which was a style popular with working women as they featured minimal decorations and were less expensive than trendy strap shoes or lattice pumps. Tiana changes into her uniform for Duke's Cafe, a yellow dress, and with its V-shaped neckline, the dress resembles popular day dresses of the time. She's also wearing a half apron as opposed to the full apron from her nighttime waitressing gig. This dress, along with the teal dress, is at the natural waist as opposed to the drop waist. This isn't necessarily accurate to the time period as that was a more popular silhouette for waitresses in the 1930s and 40s, but considering they're purposely trying to differentiate Tiana from her peers, it's a decision that makes sense. There's one interesting detail here. On the way to work, Tiana dons a hat and a coat. The outerwear isn't all that interesting, just a standard olive green coat of the time. But let's talk about the matching hat, or should I say, cloche. This unique bell-shaped hat was invented in 1908 and was immensely popular in the 1920s and 30s. Covering one's head in the day was still considered proper, and thus hats were a must-have for any young lady. It's tough to say if the cloche influenced the hair or the other way around, but at the peak of its popularity, short cropped haircuts were considered the ultimate way to show off the hat, and vice versa. They weren't the only hats worn during this time period, however, as cavalier and sailor hats were also quite popular. The Masquerade Ball. At Lottie's party, Tiana initially arrives in a brown medieval-inspired outfit. It's far from attention-grabbing, which is appropriate as she's working. However, for a dress from the 1920s that is attempting to replicate the fashion of the late 1500s, it's quite accurate. I wonder if Tiana had her mother make it? The dress features a tan tunic over a brown dress with an empire waistline and funnel sleeves. She's also wearing a matching headdress with a veil. All in all, I like the look, but it's very plain, especially next to Lottie's poofy pink dress. The scene is essentially a recreation of their earlier scene as children. It's a decade later, and Lottie is still working herself up over her would-be prince. Now, here comes one of my favorite dresses, the blue ball gown. I remember watching this in theaters and gasping when I saw it. The baby blue color is absolutely stunning on Tiana. The dress is incredibly lavish, which we can tell from how it sparkles. But considering it belongs to Lottie and she has a penchant for shiny things, I'm not at all surprised she has that in her closet. The sleeveless style would not have flown during the 1920s, however, even with the addition of the opera gloves, so it's a good thing Tiana never makes it downstairs. I tried to figure out what time period they might have been referencing, but other than the 1920s drop sash, I think I'm going to have to write this dress off as them simply wanting to have Tiana look pretty, and they definitely succeeded. I actually wanted this to be her official princess dress, but considering it's so similar to the blue dress Disney marketed Cinderella in, I suppose I shouldn't be surprised that they went with something else. The almost there dress. I was waiting to talk about Tiana's hair until this dress. It's the first and only time when Tiana is shown with the popular bobbed hairstyle of the time period. While the short hair trend had its detractors at the beginning of the decade, by the mid-1920s everyone had a bobbed haircut. Not just white women, but Black and Asian women as well. It wasn't exclusive to the upper middle class either. Women of all economic backgrounds had short hair as a fairly simple way to stay on trend that didn't rely on purchasing clothes. Considering how accurate Disney had been about historical accuracy in the film, I always wondered why they didn't give Tiana the era-appropriate haircut instead of the ponytail she wears for the majority of the film. But I suppose it probably comes down to marketing and the Disney princess brand. Snow White already had short dark hair, and it's possible Disney didn't want the two girls to have similar hairstyles, or they just wanted Tiana to have long hair like the other Disney princesses. Either way, the short bobbed cut is very cute on Tiana, and the styling seems to be an ode to Josephine Baker. But let's talk about the dress. It's another outfit that seems to be influenced by modern-day aesthetics. The dress being low-cut and sleeveless isn't necessarily an issue, as evening dresses of the time did show off the arms and décolletage. But it appears to be extremely figure-hugging, which was not the look of the time. In fact, appearing figureless was much more fashionable, hence the dropped waist and straight silhouette. The white dress actually reminds me more of evening wear from the Edwardian period than it does the Jazz Age. It's remarkably similar to the dress in the portrait of Madame X. The wedding dresses. After marrying Prince Naveen, Tiana turns back into a human, and the lily pad wedding dress is what she's magicked into. It's a little bit obvious in its influences. She was a frog, let's give her a dress that looks like a plant. But I actually think it's pretty. The large green ball gown is made up of 3 layers that resemble flower petals and has a large lily at her waist. The bodice of the top is also made to resemble flowers. The combination of the opera-length gloves and the lack of sleeves is also a nice throwback to the blue dress from the Masquerade. And I've got to say, I love the veil. Overall, I think it's a really unique design, especially when compared to some of the other princess dresses. But I can understand why some people dislike it considering how over the top it is. Something Tiana as a character is not. I happened to come across a photo of the dress where it's blue and white, and can I just say, I'm kind of obsessed with it. I think Tiana's human wedding dress is such a fun design for a Disney princess's wedding dress, which are usually poofy and long-sleeved. Because wedding dresses of the 1920s didn't extend outwards, what was popular with brides at the time were elaborate headpieces and an exaggerated veil that would reach the floor, a detail that is included in the Disney film. However, there are some modern influences in the silhouette of the gown, which in real life likely would have been far less figure-hugging, covered more of her arms, and would have featured a dropped waist. Moving on from the historical accuracy aspect, however, I love the little details on the dress like the crisscrossed green piping that resembles vines. I do, however, wish that they'd held back on the flower on the shoulder. It feels a touch excessive and is a bit too on the nose, but that's just my opinion. Otherwise, I'm totally in love with this dress, and if anyone has any plans to get married in the 2020s, this would not be a bad dress to wear. A married woman. Following her marriage to Prince Naveen, we're quickly shown a montage of Tiana. She's first shown in a burnt orange day dress, which, by the way, is one of my favorite colors to wear. It resembles her yellow work dress from the beginning of the film, except that it's a drop waist. I guess once she got married, she was able to get her hands on more era-appropriate clothing. She briefly wears a green and blue version of this dress as well. And here comes one of my favorite dresses from the entire movie, the green flapper dress. I love that they decided to give Tiana a dress that is accurate to the era and not what modern audiences think of when the 1920s is brought up. Flapper dresses, while shorter than dresses of previous years, were still fairly modest by our standards. They weren't made of little sparkly beads that showed your thighs every time you moved. That's a product of Hollywood. Flapper dresses were typically made of heavy cloth to keep them from riding up, reached past your knees, and often had an asymmetric hem, which are all qualities that Tiana's dress has. And as a way to showcase her elevated economic status, her dress is loaded with trim and details. I think it's such an elegant and classy dress. A round of applause for Disney. Before I end this video, I want to take a minute to highlight the fashion of the background and supporting characters. The animators did an amazing job with them, and it really helped with the world building of the entire film. I'm particularly in love with all of Lottie's outfits. Not only are they incredibly fashionable, as clothes belonging to a person of her economic status would be, but they're also a great representation of the character and her personality. Also, it's such a teeny tiny detail, but even Lottie's mascara brush is accurate for the time period. All in all, this was such a great film by Disney, and it's a shame that it was the last of their 2D films, because I'll always prefer them to the computer animated films. But that could just be my age showing. That's all for this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe and comment down below which of Tiana's outfits you liked the most. I'll see you soon. Bye!